Hey everyone, it's Brandon Lee with another episode of Escaping Rock Bottom, the podcast. I think I have one of the best guests on today. Super excited to have her on. Not only is she a former athlete over at ASU here in the Valley, she's also a published author, and she has a really incredible and very relatable story when it comes to addiction recovery. But her story is also inspirational, and it's hopeful. And I think she's going to provide a lot of her own life experience with us today that's really going to answer a lot of questions for just people who are wondering, maybe I do have a problem, or maybe I should go out and talk to someone. But I love sharing somebody else's story on their own design for living, on how they maintain sobriety and just even healthy relationships. Crystal Waltman is the author of a book called Quitting to Win. So go on, her audiobook is available right now. Go out there, download the audiobook and grab the book and read more about her story if you like what she has to say today. So without further ado, welcoming Krista into the podcast.
Thanks,
Good to have you here.
Thanks, Brandon.
Take me back, Crystal, to, I always ask everybody to start off, where were you born and raised?
I was born in Glendale, Arizona. I'm fourth generation Arizona.
See, and that's just weird to me. It's so rare to meet a native here in the Valley.
I was born in my house.
You were born in
in the house, delivered by the firemen.
So she is an Arizona native, and that's how native she is. She was born in her Arizona home.
Right.
That's really cool. It's always cool to meet somebody who's born and raised in Arizona because it's usually a very transient city. People move in, they move out.
Right.
So it's cool that you have roots here. All right, take me back to your childhood. What was it like?
It was pretty normal. My mom and dad got divorced when I was 1, and because he was an alcoholic. And so my mom raised my brother and I and went to church every Sunday. Went for ice cream after church.
kind of creating that perfect life.
Yeah. And there was no alcohol around or drugs because my mom had left my dad because of the chaos. So there was no introduction to it until, the teenage years.
Let me just jump right in there. So your dad was an alcoholic.
Correct.
Do you have a relationship with your dad today?
I do now, yes. He got sober when I was around 18. He almost died. And then he said, I thought I was dead because you and your mom were standing over me in the hospital room and I hadn't seen you in 18 years. And then he got sober when, he detoxed in the hospital. And then we kind of had some distance. And then when I had a child, he came back into my life, and it's like, make up. He's making up by sending her cards, coming over, taking us to lunch. Whenever husband's out of town, he's always like, I'll take you guys to dinner. What was
that like? Did your mom, growing up in a house after your mom had, left your dad because he was an alcoholic, in those very formative years of your life, and those childhood years, how did your mom speak of your dad? How did you learn about your dad and why your mom and dad weren't together?
She would say, I couldn't put up with the alcohol on Sundays and the football. I mean, the fact that we're together on a Sunday, I think is great because there are men who are sitting on the couch, drinking beer, watching football. And who wants to be around that? I mean, unless you're on the field, why do you want to be a spectator of life?
Rather than going out there and actually living life.
Right.
So 18 comes around, and I'm wondering, when did you start to... I started to rebel at the age of 15. That's the first time I got into sex and the first time I got into cocaine.
Right.
So where did you start to go off the rails in your teenage years? Did you start to rebel, or did you keep it all together?
Yeah, no. I started to rebel early on in junior high. It was 3 elementary schools came together, and you're just put together, with 1,000 kids, all from 3 different sides of the tracks. And, cocaine was coming in through Arizona at the time. Yeah. And that fueled the gang activity in our area. And so there was that going on. But I made varsity softball my freshman year at 14. And so at 14, I was with the 18-year-olds, and we were winning, and we won. And then, I was celebrating with them, and that was my first blackout. So I was taller than most and more physically mature that I was with the 18-year-olds, look like them, but emotionally I was not there.
And that goes back to my parents, I grew up in a really wealthy part of the country in Orange County, California, Laguna Beach, Newport Beach, Corona Del Mar. My parents worked really, really hard. And so I don't fault them for the mentality that they had, that we had to run, and work to provide. Because I give my parents, I give them some leeway, because their belief was, if we work really hard, we're doing it for our kids so they can grow up in Orange County, they can go to private schools, they can do those things. Okay, great. I did reap the rewards of that. I traveled, played soccer in Europe. I, was able to play competitive sports. I was able to go to the best schools. But looking back in hindsight, what I missed, my parents were never around. They were never there when I came home from work, from school. They didn't show up to my soccer games. They weren't there to see the championships. And so they missed out on so many of those formative years, those bonding years. What did you experience, even coming from, a single mom household, which I'm sure she had to work at times, but here you are, a superior athlete as well.
Right. So yeah, my mom did remarry when I was 10, and I rebelled against that because I felt like I was losing my mom. And she was a hairdresser in Sun City, which is a retirement community. Anyway, Saturday was her biggest day because she had all these set and rolls and get everybody ready for church. Same 18 ladies every Saturday for 25 years. But she missed all my games. Right. That was her big day that she had to work, and it was always cash. She always had cash around, because it was tips and stuff like that. But, right. She had to work because sports was expensive. But being part of the team and a travel team and seeing that early on and being with girls in different parts of the state, and then traveling, you see people that have more and whose parents are around all the time, and they're traveling with them. And you're like, what are they doing? Like, that was my first experience to Scottsdale, Arizona, was from Glendale, was, having a teammate that lived in Scottsdale. I'm like, what? You have a batting cage in your backyard? Okay,
like,
well,
where's my batting cage?
I had a tire attached to a pole that I would just hit. It had a cut through the tire, right? So anyways, she was, and very church, and if we didn't talk about it, it wasn't happening. So even though, the alcohol and the drugs started with consequences early on, and but she just, I don't know, we never talked about it. It was just like, as long as I was doing well in grades and was doing well in my sport and performing, I had that performance God. Everything else was just pushed aside. And from the outside, everything looked great. And these binging blackouts started at the early age of 14. And I'm like, it took me until I got it pulled over on my 20th birthday, and then had to go to these alcohol classes, which were meetings at the time, right? But that was my first experience. And, where you go in and they give you this pamphlet, and then they're like, answer these questions. Yeah. That's like one test you don't want to pass.
Yeah.
The 12 questions. I put those 12 questions in my book too, because it was the first time I'd seen those. I'm like, what do you mean blacking out's not normal? This isn't normal. I'm like, yes. But my life was still so put together.
The one thing that I really identify with your story is almost that work hard, play hard mentality that was ingrained into my brain at such an early age. Mm-hmm. In seventh grade, I became an overachiever, and I became an overachiever because I was trying to win over my parents' affection and earn their attention. And so I ran for student body president in seventh grade. I won. I was part of the ODP Olympic Development Program. I was doing all those things. And then I started to bring booze to school, and I started to take orange slices and marinate them in vodka the night before. And I took them to seventh grade and got all my friends drunk. And so a kid ratted on me, and I got suspended for a week. And I remember overhearing my parents' conversation as I was in the house. And this was what they said. They're like, what do we do? Because he has straight A's. He's on club team. He's playing for ODP. He messed up, but how do we discipline him?
Right.
They're like, just let him sit home for the week. So right there, I learned, Brandon, as long as you excel in school, as long as you kick ass in sports, you can do whatever you want.
Right. And being a high performing athlete
Yeah.
is a great playground for alcoholics
Totally.
because you have this big high of preparation and it's the process that you love. And then, you just get to get out of your mind and black out.
It's part of, it
It's
really
part
is.
of the culture that I
It is
grew up in.
part of that competitive culture that we really did grow up in. So, so we get past that. You have a daughter,
Yes.
right? And she's how old?
9 years old.
9 years old. Now, you also are married. How long have you been married?
15 plus years.
Okay. So you met your husband when you were actively drinking.
Yeah. We met in Las Vegas.
Okay, well there you go. Definitely were drinking. How was that? How has that been? Like, what was that like?
Yeah.
Just being married and drinking.
Yeah. We met and we were, so he had children.
Okay.
So he had children every other weekend. So I was a stepmom, right? Every other weekend. So we would party.
Jet set on the weekends you didn't have the kids?
Exactly. and it was a great balance, right, for him because he could executively go back to the office and had no problem with it. But then when he would leave or he traveled quite a bit, I would get into this, why aren't I with him? Why aren't I on the road with him? Early on in the marriage, I would travel a lot with him. And then it got less and less because of my drinking.
Yeah.
Because we would be in South Beach and I was supposed to show up for dinner and I'd come back and still be on the beach with like a weed in my hair or something. Like, what? I'm still at the Mondrian. Sorry. I was supposed to be dressed. Oops. Then it came to a point where he couldn't trust me to take me on the road with him because he didn't know where I would end up during the day. Usually not too far from the beach or the pool, but, in any direction.
Yeah.
And then, so, he would go back to work on Mondays or he would travel and I would fall into this loneliness and depression. And I'd be like, I'm not going to do that again. Monday I'd shut down. I'd do not disturb my house phone and cell phones, everything off, just go into isolation.
Right.
For 24 or 48 hours, whatever. I could just do that because I could. And then Wednesday I'd feel better. Thursday I'd take a shower and get my, go get my hair blow dried. I'd feel, and then happy hour would start again on a martini at 3:00, and it was that pattern. And just that pattern. And did you watch that movie Girl on a Train with Emily Blunt?
Oh my God, I know that movie. And I remember, like, I know Emily Blunt, and I remember, maybe I just saw the trailers because I'm seeing her on that train, but I can't recall it.
So she got divorced and she was alcoholic. And then she witnessed a murder in a blackout and didn't know, and then spent the whole movie trying to recall her memory during a blackout.
Yes.
That movie hit me so hard because of those blank spaces that I've had, that I had. I'm like, did that really happen? You know, when people tell you that this and this and this happened, like before cell phones, kind of before there was like, you could look back on your stuff and verify, you were here at this time or,
100%.
And then people tell you what happened. You're like, oh shit. Like, am I guilty if I'm in a blackout? That woman that got away from like stabbing her husband and she was like sleeping. She got away with it in Arizona. It's one of those cases. Yeah. And I'm like, it just scared the shit out of me that I don't know what I was participating in and what was going on and what was really going on. And I was in this vicious cycle. And I'm just, as my daughter, I was able to stop when I got pregnant because I wanted her so bad. I had stillborn before. But that was like in a unhealthy relationship, where we were high drugs, high steroids, high athletics. And it's just no wonder why the baby didn't survive.
Right.
We were both living to the very risky. So fast forward 10 years later, married. Now I have my daughter. I was like, I'll do anything to have her. I just wanted her so bad. So I was able to stop drinking for 2 years, after
just kind of cold turkey, no real.
No, when I got pregnant, and then I stopped, and then I breastfed. So I stopped after that, and I was like, okay, But I went away many times to try to rehab myself without actually going to rehab. Like, let me go to Palm Springs for.
Oh, jeez. Let me go to the Parker for a few days, honey, and detox.
And, he was always very supportive. Why don't you just go away? You just go to the spa. It's okay. You don't have to be so extreme and like commit yourself to you're an alcoholic. Like, just go take a break. Just go relax. Yeah, but when I got back, my life was still the same. I still had the same stuff running through my head. I didn't change any of the tapes. So I would come back and thinner and look better, but still in the same emotional state that would then put me right back into a drunken, blackout belligerent.
Well, I love the dynamic of, and talk as much as you want to, because I think it's super relatable for a lot of women out there. Maybe even dealing with a spouse who may look at them and be like, baby, you don't have that big of a problem. You need to do this. So I would love to you kind of explain what it's like for you to know that listen, addicts know their lives are out of control. All right. Like sometimes we just don't want to admit it, but we all recognize when our behavior is out of control. What is it like to, maybe have a husband who maybe because of public perception reasons doesn't want the whole world to know that maybe his wife is battling addiction? Why do you think he maybe has been maybe a little bit reluctant for you just to be so full blown and being like, I have a problem. I need to get this shit under control. Do you think it's because of a stigma that exists around addiction and doesn't want maybe that image?
I think maybe part of that, but also maybe part of just because that's what he is. Like that's his love language is fix. What do you need? Let me fix it. Like if I come to him with the problem, it's more like, okay, well, what do you need? It's like, well, I just need somebody to listen to me. Yeah. I just want to connect with somebody. Yeah. But it's hard because he is not an addict. So, there's that there's this misfire. And when I first got sober 5 years ago, I didn't know if my marriage was going to make it or not. But I knew I could not keep control of being a parent. I was risking losing my daughter had I kept going on the risky lifestyle of drinking and driving and day drinking. I mean, I was Ubering like to dance by 3:00 because I had started drinking martinis at the mall shopping,
Wow.
And it was like I was making excuses for the cars in the shop. The car's never in the shop. We just Ubered, and my daughter thought the driver.
Mommy, why does the car keep breaking down?
No, she's like, oh, here comes our ride. Let's go to dance. The town car shows up, and it's like, oh, you just, and there was one point where he said, you have to stop. You're no good to us, because he is a parent. And so he kind of drew the line in the sand, but didn't want me to stop all the way. Just stop. Can't you just do it every other weekend with me like we had before when she can go away? And that would be great if I could do that. I wish I could turn it on and off.
Normies can turn it on and off.
But I cannot turn it on and off. If I get one, if one is good, two is better. Right. More is better.
I am so of that mentality. Before we go further into that part, I am a really firm believer that some sort of trauma is the gateway as to why people reach for booze or drugs to kind of numb and to cope. Not all traumas are the same. What do you think that was maybe traumatic in your childhood that perhaps kind of threw off your wiring?
Yes, I've heard you ask this before in most of your conversations, and I've been giving it a lot of thought. And I think it roots back to the fear of abandonment. I think from my father not being there, my mom being at work, even my brother leaving to the Marines. Like when he left, I felt totally abandoned. Like I wanted to sign up for the Marines just to be with him because I was like, you can't leave me. Yeah. And I think, and then, when the husband goes off to work or he's on the road, it's just like I felt that emptiness because I didn't have a connection. And my connection, my higher power was alcohol. I mean, it was like my master. It was like as soon as I started to feel uncomfortable in my skin, something's uncomfortable. I could be happy or I could be sad. I just started to feel something. I'm like, oh, I better have a drink. Okay, I better have a drink.
Yeah, I always say to people, living with that trauma, it's like, and we talked about earlier going into survival mode, and I went into survival mode at a super young age. My mom will never admit it, but she definitely, I can easily say that she is narcissistic, bipolar, up in that. In the sense that I lived in a house where I walked on eggshells. I never knew what mom was going to walk in that door. My mother is not a nurturer. She's a breeder. I believe mothers are two things. They're either breeders or they're nurturers. My mother was not a nurturer. So I never was like held and just told like, I love you unconditionally. That had to be earned. The other thing too is, like I said, walking on eggshells. Like I just didn't know what mom, was I going to get beat? Was I going to be yelled at? Was it going to be poison pen day? Like I just didn't know. And so what I did is I learned to walk on eggshells, right? Not wanting to upset anybody, wanting to keep everybody around me happy. And so I never got to voice my opinion. Like I never got to voice how I truly felt. And so that all made me feel very uncomfortable. So the moment alcohol and drugs took that edge off, all I knew at that age, at 15 or even as a kid or even in my 20s, was that, because I didn't have the processes to understand. But what I look back at, I just know when I do this, it feels a whole lot better than the way I felt when I wasn't doing it. And that was enough just to keep me going.
Yeah.
And to keep hitting the bottle and to keep hitting the drugs.
Yes. And my best friend and I came back together in Christmas break at home. And we went to different colleges to play softball. And she left me and went and committed suicide. Oh. High performer, collegiate athlete. And it was that was the first time in my life, like 19, when my parents ever asked me, how do you feel? Are you okay? Is this too much? Like never, like exactly what you said. It was never, how are you doing? Are you okay? Is this, never asked that. No, until I was 19 and it took my friend, and then the whole community kind of like regrouped and was like, oh, is this too much? This, the sports over and over, or the school. And so the reason why I wrote the book was just to recover out loud, because you never know what the face of mental illness is, that it looks like this. It looks like your mother, your neighbor, your cousin, it's all like just 1 degree away. And to lose my best friend, it was just a spiral. And then it just began from there again. Like I did not know how to process suicide. I didn't even know what that was. I was like, why her? Not like I should have been the one that died. Like, why her, not me? Or she was my best friend. Why didn't we do it together?
You're like, you were partying without me? Yeah. So,
right.
because I do definitely want to get into this, to the other side of addiction with you. Relapse is part of your story. And if you can quickly tell me how long what led up to that relapse, what was the relapse like, and how long did that relapse last?
Yeah. So after I was desperate, surrendered, found myself in my first classes of AA, 90 meetings in 90 days, stopped my life. I couldn't do anything. And I would sit there. I could barely smile. I cried for like the first 30 days. And it took me like 90 days even before I could like participate at all, or just, pass. Could barely. I had a great relationship with my sponsor. She was an older woman, like 30 years plus sobriety, all put together, but had been through like 3 husbands. Yeah. Art studio owner. She looked like she walked off a cover of a magazine, always like the matching tops and bottoms. And I always looked, and she was my neighbor. She was my only neighbor that didn't drink. And I was like, well, how does she not drink? Why doesn't she drink? And one day I was depressed, and I was pushing my daughter in the stroller, and she was like, where's your husband? How's everything going? I go, how do you not drink? And she goes, well, I'll tell you all about it. Come with me Sunday at 5.
Oh, wow.
So we get into her big car. We're driving towards Paradise Valley. I'm like, oh, great. We're going to go to, a sunset dinner. No, right past the great hotel restaurants and into the church. And around the church and to the meeting spaces. And she took me to my first meeting. And I saw her every week every Sunday for a whole year. And we went through the steps right away. She got me to open up, write the letters, write the amends. I just did, just like an athlete. Here's your playbook. I just was able to do it. And I did it. And I just surrendered. And I did everything she told me to do. I started to get happy, joyous, and free. But there was still that like anonymity thing that I was struggling with.
Right.
Because I was just declining social invitations. I wasn't really like telling anybody what was going on, and nobody really knew, but I was just like making excuses like, oh, no, thank you, we're busy type thing. This year, missing a whole year of events.
Yeah, I know exactly what that's like.
And then after, I got my year chip, and then March came around again, and I feel that crisp in the air, and I kind of thought that I healed myself, and people were in town, and, I had thought about it for a couple weeks. I discussed it with my husband, even like, do you think I could drink again?
Yeah.
I don't know, and he was kind of like, yeah, I think you should. You're so uptight. I like you better when you're relaxed.
Yeah.
So we talked about it. And then, one night I had a drink. The next night I had 2 drinks. The next night I had 3 drinks. And it took me 3 weeks before I was in the ER again.
3 weeks.
3 weeks. Because I was like, okay, well, we'll drink this weekend. Then I started hiding it from him again, right? And then
God, it does not take long for those
no. And then it's like,
demons to surface.
Well, you can't drink without Coke. It's okay.
Yeah.
So you get, you need something to bring you down.
You need those sleeping pills and my Xanax.
And then you're on that constant balancing act of these, like pharmacists. I just can't. I mean, like, more is better. And then boom. My daughter saw me on the floor. He was in New York, and it was a disaster. It was a disaster.
So you have not continuous sobriety. How many total years of sobriety have you got right now?
Yeah. So this March 22nd, it'll be 2 years.
2 years.
Yeah.
But total time in recovery, how much time?
Over 5.
Over 5.
Yes.
Okay, so I'm of this belief, and it goes totally against the grain of AA. So I'm not gonna like force you into something uncomfortable. Yep. I always will look at you as somebody who has 5 years of sobriety experience to share. The reason why I say that, and I love that we're getting to this part of the conversation, war stories are done, because I'm of this belief that I look at totality of sobriety. I look at life as a marathon, and I ran the New York City Marathon back in 2017. Mile marker number 17, my body started to cramp up, and my legs started to give out. And I stopped over at the side of the race, and one of the race officials, she came over to me. She goes, "How you doing?" And I started to break down. And I was like, I've trained so hard for this. I am supposed to average a 7-minute and 30-mile pace, and this is killing my pace. I was like, I'm not going to make the time I've set to make. And she's looking at me like, okay. She goes, let's get you some electrolytes. Let's get some fluids in your system. I'm like, okay. And I was like, I got to get back. She goes, hold on. She goes, are you trying to win the race? And I'm like, well, I trained really hard for this time. She goes, okay, I'm going to let you in on a little secret. They already won. Okay. Like, they're about an hour ahead of you. Okay, they've already crossed the finish line. You're not going to win the race. And I'm like, I know, but I'm not going to hit my time. And she's like, oh, God, who cares? Mm-hmm. She goes, what we're going to do, don't worry about it. We're going to get electrolytes. She goes, you have some cramping. I'll rub out your legs for you, and we'll get you back on, and you're going to walk to the finish line. She goes, because you can finish this race. And I was like so disappointed that like my body's giving out on me, and I'm not going to hit that time. What happened? I got back up, started at mile marker number 17, and I continued the race. Did that race official tell me, hey, Brandon, guess what? You got to go back to Staten Island at mile marker number 1 and restart your race? That would have been absolutely daunting to me. Did I lose all of that experience from mile marker 1 to 17? No, I did not. I picked myself back up with the experience and all the effort that I put into mile marker number 17, and I crossed that goddamn finish line. Now, for addiction, the finish line is death of natural causes. That's the hope. Right. Death of natural causes. Addiction and recovery is like a marathon. It is not a sprint. So that is why I tell people, okay, if you relapse for 3 weeks, okay, and you're back in the program, great. You have 3 weeks of dark time. Who cares? You still have the years leading up to that as experience. So I get it. It's looked at differently of continuous sobriety in the rooms of AA. I look at sobriety differently. So I will always look at you as you have 5 years of recovery experience to pass on to somebody else. I'm not going to force you to say you have 5 years of recovery, because the world of AA.
Let me tell you my experience with that. So I go back to my sponsor after I relapse, and she goes, 90 meetings, 90 days. And I was like, no. Like I already have all that. No, I already have that foundation.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm good going back to like 3 meetings a week
Right.
in my women's groups. I get my circle back together, let out what was bothering me and need
For
to dig
sure.
deeper, do amends again. Okay, get a new sponsor. And I did. So that led to my second sponsor.
And see, and
So I had that same kind of experience too, but I agree with the way I say I've been in the, program and recovery for 5 years.
right. 2 years continuous sobriety.
On their, their report card. Yeah.
Yeah. And here's
It's
the other
different.
thing. I think that when I was part of the rooms of AA, I think that we make too much to do about celebrating birthdays. And I know that we should always celebrate people's birthdays, and I'm all for that. And I think that I get the argument that it really does show the newcomer that, hey, listen, the newcomer who's got 30 days, like, look at that person just celebrated 15 years. Amazing. But here's where it gets thrown, is that we start to look at it like, hi, my name's Brandon. This is the way it always works in an AA meeting. Hi, what's your name? My name is Brandon. What is the immediate second? How much time do you have? That's always the way it goes. Who are you? How much time? Mm-hmm. I'm like, why are we judging people by that?
Yeah.
Should we just go, hey, my name is Brandon, and go, how's life going for you?
Today, and just go by
And just,
today. Are you
how's-
here sober today?
Yeah, and
We're
how's
here
life
sober
for you?
today.
Well,
Yeah.
life's great. I got a podcast, got the most amazing job. I've got great relationships in my life. Judge me by that. Who cares how much time I have? Because if all my life is put together and everything is going great, who cares? Because guess what? I've had guys at age 30 and 33 years of sobriety ask a guy who had 7 or 8 years sober to be their sponsor. So that just upends that whole idea that because you have 33 years that you should just be this this man of wisdom in recovery, but your life can still be messy if you're not addressing everything. So that brings me back to a multi-pronged approach to recovery. And that is therapy, being open to science, EMDR light therapy, Reiki master, shaman for the spirituality. It's a multi-pronged approach for long-term recovery. What are you doing in your life outside of just AA to kind of enrich your life and grow?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that, because my book is about spiritual fitness, right? And the physical sober part is just one part of it, being
Yes.
physically sober. Like you can take out the alcohol and the drugs, but then you still have to eat, right? Because then my noise switched over to food noise, because I'd be walking around my kitchen at 3:00 and go like, I can't have happy hour. Okay. I can't do anything. Okay. I already ate for the day. What am I going to eat? Like, I already worked out. I already did this. My house is clean, right? Everything's like in order and I'm sober. Now what?
Yeah.
So then, that service part, I try to reach out to 3 people every day. I still do that. And whether they answer the phone or not, it doesn't matter. But they know. And if I get into my head, like I'm something more than 10 minutes is playing over in the tape, I will call my top 5 on speed dial.
For sure.
And I'm just like, talk me. Where's my part in this? Right. So I still have all those tools and that foundation.
Yep.
Even though I don't go to meetings every day.
Right.
But out of that program, I've met some of my bestest friends.
Yeah.
And they are my closest girlfriends, and they have what I want. They are up the road ahead of me. So I can say, what does it look like up there?
Yeah.
As far as like marriage progressing or children getting older or starting your career. Now I'm just barely recovering out loud, finding my voice outside of an athlete and outside of a mom and outside of a wife. So I'm finding my own voice outside of that, but it's taken 5 years, where I was kind of on eggshells of like, will I ever get hired again to be a coach, to coach kids?
The stigma.
What are they going to say? Am I going to get shunned by the soccer moms? Who knows? You know what I mean? And I am just blown away by the response of people reaching out to me. I probably get roughly 2 things a day.
Yes.
On Insta. We'll just say like, you're so brave. Thanks for sharing your story. You have inspired me to heal.
Yes.
You've inspired me to look back at my past and see this. And I have teammates, and the teammates that will have just been reaching out to me and saying like, all right, You're leading us. All right. You're leading us. And I used to lead them the other way.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I was like, all right, let's get out of here. Let's go party.
And I think that's where you and I like really connect on this level when we talk about anonymity and really just peeling back the layers. This podcast, one of the reasons why I started this podcast was to put a face. And some people are like, hey, Brandy, like you would ask, is it video or audio or is it both? And I'm like, no, it is both. When I started this podcast, the reason why I wanted video and audio is to put a face to the voice.
Right.
I wanted people to see the addict who is speaking. And so a lot of people have decided not to come on the podcast because they wanted to keep that anonymity and they wanted to do voice only. And I'm like, that's cool. Like, I respect that. You do you. But the reason I did this podcast is because you and I have experience in the rooms. So I know that there are A-list. And when I say A-list, I mean A-list actors. Okay, A-list actors who are in there, like ones that everybody knows of. And there's doctors, there's lawyers, there's pharmacists, there's nurses, there's news anchors. And what I noticed was public perception is not meeting the reality of the addicts who are sick and the addicts who are healed. And so I said, okay, this is why a stigma exists. A stigma exists because the only ones who are loud about it are giving the stereotype that, you know, you're a junkie, you know, you're trash or you're poor and you've got nothing to live for. You got nothing to lose. That's why you're opening up your mouth or you're attention seeking. But I'm like, but that's not true. I'm like, because I am witnessing all these hugely professional and successful people who are in recovery but are just not speaking about it because they're afraid they're going to lose their job, they're going to lose their clients, they're going to lose their standing in their community. So I'm like, okay, done. Let's begin a movement where we strip away people's anonymity and you only do that by you speaking out, by me speaking out to give that next person saying, okay, well, Brandon's successful. He's not receiving backlash. So maybe that's going to give me strength because the more people like us that speak out, it gives it a safer environment for other people to come forward, to be successful in corporate America, to be like, no, you can be us and we can still be successful.
That's right. And for those of you who don't know, who've never been to the rooms, or maybe your parents, but part of the program is to keep what goes on in the rooms. And so that's what Brandon is talking about, is like how I have decided to recover out loud. And I think, you know, that this will not relapse because I am crystal clear that I can never drink again. And I'm okay to recover out loud. And, you know, when I published my book, your name kept coming up. You got to meet Brandon. Have you met Brandon Lee? Have you met Brandon Lee? And now I can see why, because we have the same ideology about recovery. And back to the prong approach, food, back to food. Yeah. But I believe in, you know, exercise.
Hugely,
There's five
too.
things that I'm really passionate about. Yeah. Water, sleep, food, movement, and connection. And those five things are my spiritual fitness and what I have to do every day. And I can't do anything before I do that because I'm no good to anybody unless I do that. If I don't sleep, like, forget it. I shut down usually 8:00 every night. And I'm like, I got to go to bed because I love the sunrise and I love the sunset, you know. And eating good food. Like if I eat bad food, I'm just really sensitive to salt and sugars and stuff. So I just don't enjoy eating bad because now I know what it feels like to feel good, you know? And it's not like I'm feeling thin because I did an 8-ball and was up for 3 days, 15 pounds down. This is like a good feeling, you know? And you had said people were mentioning your glow and stuff like that. And I am getting the same thing.
And it's not always the lighting.
And they're right.
It's not always the ring light.
This is good lighting. You do have this good light here. But you know, when people will look at my photos and they're like, gosh, something was really different. Yeah. Well, I was on pills and alcohol here. I was so puffy. That's what happened. It's like, no, I didn't get anything done. It's just healthy living. And I have cheekbones.
Dude, I was like the best. Ready for this? My friend in LA, huge Hollywood producer. This is hilarious because it goes online what you're saying. So I posted something on Instagram. He calls me up and he goes, what the fuck are you, Benjamin Button? He goes, Brandon. He goes, you look like you were 50 or 40 10 years ago. You're 40 now. You look like you're aging in reverse. And I'm like, yeah, imagine what taking booze and drugs out of your system does. You drink a ton of water. I drink 48 ounces of white tea a day. It's my favorite.
Nice.
But I'm like, yeah, look at that. Like, you're right. I do look younger as I'm getting older. It's only because I'm living a super healthy lifestyle.
Right.
Like, I care about what I put in my body.
Right.
There's a reason why cancer is only prevalent in America. Like, go around the world. Cancer is not a pandemic. It is an epidemic in America. Why? Because look at all the junk we put into our bodies. It's no different than alcoholism or drug abuse.
It's no different.
Food is the same way. You are killing yourselves by putting junk into your body. Junk in, junk out. I don't care if it's booze or drugs or Slurpees at Circle
That's
K
right.
and those massive, whatever the hell they call them now. And I'm like, I see people going in. I'm like, you're just drinking sugar. But it ends in cancer, and cancer ends in death.
Right. All disease starts with dis-ease, and that's by putting whatever you put into your body. And so alcoholism is number 3 by lifestyle choice diseases. Like, you can be born with the gene, but you can get a daily reprieve by your spiritual fitness.
Yes.
And tobacco just got pushed to number 2. It's been number 1. It was in the running for many, many years. Now it's pushed to number 2, and obesity is number 1 because of the high sugary drinks.
Yes.
I mean, now they're creating laws to make the cups smaller.
Yeah.
It's like, that is the worst drug out there right now, is the
100%.
sugar.
Yes.
So I had food noise going for a little bit, and then I just switched over to plant-based, and it just like all went away. It was like, it was like.
I'm plant-based too, and it's changed my life.
Well, that's it. That's our glow then.
Yeah.
That's got to be the glow.
It's so
I didn't
true.
even know that.
Like, it's plant-based, but it's true. I feel better. I'm super healthy. And I'm like, and here's the other thing. Like, I have reached a point, I can speak to another athlete about this. So I have reached a point in my life, body dysmorphia was really huge for me. So I used to pump myself full of steroids. I used to drink a shake that had 3,000 calories in it because I was always that like soccer player skinny kid growing up. And then finally I applied the steps of AA. And that's why I always like, even though I don't consider myself a current member of AA still laid the foundation to this beautiful life that I'm living. Right. So full stop, I give full credit to AA for giving me this beautiful life because I've applied the principles of AA to body dysmorphia. Right. And so now I look at myself, I weigh 157. That you would have scared the shit out of me years ago. I'd been like, oh my God, you need to eat and do steroids to get bigger. But the way I look at my mind and body now, as I look at myself as I'm super lean, but I refuse to just go to the gym just to lift weights for an aesthetic reason. So I laugh because all my gay friends are like, they're lifting their 50s and 75s, getting their chest all big. They're like, hey, B, we're on vacation. B, you want to go work out? I was like, I'm on vacation. I'm not working out. Get the hell out of here. So the heaviest dumbbells I lift are 25s. And my friends are like, dude, 25s, women do that. I'm like, I'm not here to get buff. I only do things that make me happy now. So I play tennis 4 days a week. Why? Because tennis makes me happy. I'm joyous and free out there. Like, nothing puts a bigger smile on my face than playing tennis. Going to a big box gym doesn't put a smile on my face. Right. So I'm not going. Right. So I don't.
So same thing. I mean, when I was playing college ball, I was like overtrained, overfed.
Yes.
Right. So I was like blown up just because of the
and
training
you played softball.
And the food program. Right. And as soon as I stopped playing, I just kind of shrunk up. And then it's been 5 years since I've been lifted a weight also, because when I got sober, I just started doing yoga and I'm like, I just want to do that. And that's it. That makes me feel good. That releases like the endorphins of that drug. And I feel like if your body is made to let off those dopamines and those natural drugs. So if you know how to tap into that, then it's like you found the keys to the kingdom.
100%.
Right. And so like I haven't lifted weights in 5 years and they're like, well, how do you get your abs? Well, abs are made in the kitchen. In the kitchen.
Abs really are made in the kitchen.
Abs are made in the kitchen.
Yeah.
And, download my smoothie drinks or how to juice or, it's like as soon as I get sick or somebody gets sick or they're like, they talk about taking a pill or high blood pressure or at a certain age. Well, I'm just this age. Now I might have high something and like acceptance of it. I'm like, no, why don't you just take a minute, juice for 6 weeks, tell your doctor you'll come back, change everything.
Yeah.
Like, why are you going to give in to that one pill at 40 and then another one? So I watched my stepdad die of lifestyle choice disease by the high cholesterol pill at 40, and then that one put off the blood pressure, then that one put off the this, and then Coumadin, and then
right. It's a pill to cope. It's a pill to fix rather than going to the root of the problem.
Going to the root, and I'm like, why don't you throw that shit away and go to the beach and detox yourself? Like I would say that to him, and I feel like I got into a personal training after college. I personal trained just because that was my natural next step to do, and and he was also getting bigger, and it was that time period where like the American white man with the fat belly was funny, and it wasn't funny. It was very unhealthy, but it was like, the dads, like with the softball daughters, they would just like, they just had that belly. Yeah. And that was just their look. And it was so acceptable. It was like barbecue, meat after meat after meat. Let's eat meat on top of meat on top of meat. And it's like, well, I know what it was. The movie Fork Over Knife.
Never saw it.
And Game Changer.
Okay.
So Fork Over Knife is about two cardiologists who live in the Midwest who own farms and cattle. They're both vegetarian and went plant-based because they were cardiologists, and they would do open heart, and then 4 years later they'd have that same patient back on their table again.
Oh.
So they decided, and I just watched that movie. I had watched two people, a woman my age who had same age daughters go through breast cancer, and then I watched that movie, and they just said, you lessen your chance of getting cancer if you don't eat meat. And it was just like that simple for me. Like, it wasn't the PETA stuff back in the day, like the animal cruelty. That didn't do it for me. And then it was that. And then Fork Over Knife, a Game Changer, was made by Arnold Schwarzenegger, and it profiled athletes, and it actually tested their blood. So they took like teams of what their pre-game meals were, like NFL teams and college teams. Yeah. And then it measured their performance and their oxygen level in their blood. So it put the science behind it. And then it put them on plant-based a week before the game. And I was like, that's it, done. 2 movies, and it got rid of all my food noise.
Wow.
So just those, and it's like, overeat on strawberries, almonds. You're not going to, your body's naturally, it does all the right things and just triggers off. Yeah, well,
your body I always say your body knows what to do. I always laugh at people. They're like, this is just crazy. Mm-hmm. I won't eat a banana. It has too much sugar in it. I'm like, sit down and stop that craziness. Right. I don't want to eat fruit because it has too much sugar. I mean, but that's the education. I'm like, your body knows what to do with natural sugar. Your body doesn't know what to do with processed sugar. Like, overload on natural sugar, your body's like, okay, waste. Like, that's easy. Like, we know how to get rid of that. Right. Okay, so it's crazy how time flies.
Time is flying.
Time is flying. So, Crystal Waltman, she is the author of Quitting to Win. You can order the book. It's also available as an audiobook. So if you like what she has to say, you want to hear more about her story, how she kind of got through it and where she's at today, go ahead and check her book out. Parting words, words of advice or wisdom for those who are listening or watching. Some parting words.
You can recover, and you can recover out loud. It's the basics. The basics of finding spiritual fitness is sleeping, water, food, connection, and movement. And life can be that simple, and it can be great.
I love that. Thank you for coming on.
Thanks, Brandon.
Yeah, and we'll get you on the motivational speaking circuit. We'll make that happen. So, because I think your story really can be so relatable to so many, just the moms out there, like the moms out there who may be kind of struggling and don't want to say anything because they don't want to upset their social circle. It's a real thing.
It's
a real thing. So thank you at home for listening to this episode of Escaping Rock Bottom, available on Google Play, Spotify, iTunes, YouTube, and my website, escapingrockbottom.com. Have a good day. We'll see you back here for the next episode.